All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are having a great Tuesday evening. My name is Garrett McLaughlin. Tonight, we're going to cover in the Ignite Your Own Education series. We'll talk about the recovery pyramid, how to maximize recovery with an evidence-based approach. So this is one area that I think a lot of people are overlooking. We're so focused on the training piece, right? If I train more, if I train better, I'm going to see better results. Unfortunately, if that training stimulus is not also matched with proper recovery, that will lead to poor performance, burnout, injury, overtraining, and a lot of these negative kind of side effects of not focusing on proper recovery. So excited to dig into this a little bit with you today. These education series, mini webinars, hopefully 20, 30 minutes max, get you out of here and on with your Tuesday evening. I always reflect on the research when creating these. So a lot of this is not my personal, I try not to make it my personal opinion, but by looking through these different research articles, using this information to really guide the presentation as much as possible. And then you make the best decision based on the information, what works for you. If you're someone that's a nerd like me and you want to dig into some of these, you're welcome to screenshot this page. Look into some of these articles if you want to see kind of some of the behind the scenes information that's going into the webinar today. So focus of the presentation, we're going to review the effectiveness of various forms of recovery. If you look on the left side of the screen, you will see the recovery pyramid. This is something that I stole off Instagram about a month or two ago. I really liked it. I saw, and I'm very into the research and making sure we can back our claims. I think there's so much out there that people are throwing around that have not in any way been proven in the research and have even been disputed to be effective. But in the endurance community, so much of that stuff is just common recommendations by running stores, by other coaches and therapists. When I saw this, it piqued my interest because one, recovery, stress mitigation, all of that has been something I talk about with my clients on a regular basis on our check-in calls alongside our sessions. But this was showing, just based on the research, what we can actually prove, what has the most evidence, and then what has the least evidence. And I think what you'll notice as you look at this pyramid, where most people spend their time is actually in this section of the pyramid that has the least evidence. So hopefully today we can talk about this and why. But great thing, why I really liked, this is the Physio Network, which is like an evidence-based physical therapy group that puts out a lot of really good content. I recommend you follow them. They had the cited research at the bottom. So to me, it's like, okay, they're telling me this is the best way to recover. They're not just making it up, but they have looked through the research to come to these conclusions, which I kind of really respect and can relate to there. So hopefully based on this webinar today, you'll learn how to enhance the recovery process to improve performance, hopefully reduce the likelihood of injury, burnout, overtraining, and then we'll jump into a quick Q&A at the very end. Full disclosure, this is going to cover a range of topics, many of which I am not an expert in. I'm just someone who is a middleman here as I pass along that information and that research to you. I'm not a registered dietitian. I'm not a sleep specialist. I'm not other things, right? I'm a licensed athletic trainer, strength conditioning coach, and active release techniques provider. So interesting about that is, right, soft tissue work. This is something that I've spent 12 to 15 grand on additional soft tissue manual therapy certifications. And you'll notice that I rarely do that, which is a hard pill to swallow, right? After spending that much time doing certifications in Kansas City, Atlanta, Nashville, I was all over the place doing some of these. And then as the research began to evolve, it's something that I've moved away from more and more just because we're seeing it's less backed by the research. So some of the stuff I love, other parts of this is hard to swallow for me because there was a lot of time and effort put in there. So it's my intention today to simply share the research and expand your thinking. Do whatever you want with this. Believe it or not, change or not, it is completely up to you. I'm not telling you what to do, but hopefully just opening your eyes to what the research is actually telling us so you can make better and more informed decisions moving forward. Love this quote. This is in one of the articles. So in terms of goals of recovery, right? Adequate recovery has been shown to result in the restoration of physiological and psychological processes so that the athlete can compete or train again at an appropriate level. Recovery from training and competition is complex and typically dependent on the nature of the exercise performed and any other outside stressors. Athletic performance is affected by numerous aspects, and therefore adequate recovery should also consider such factors. Couple really important things here, right? We're looking for physiological and psychological recovery. What you'll see in some of these, when we talk about cold water immersion, we talk about compression gear and all of that, there's a lot of research showing that it improves our perception of recovery, but doesn't actually improve recovery. So we need a good balance of physiological recovery, right? Our body is actually healing, regenerating, getting stronger, adapting from that stimulus to recover properly for that next training session, and psychological. We want to feel better and feel like we're doing the right things to address our bodies to facilitate that process as well. So we want to look at it from both ends to a degree. Another thing that's important here to look at is outside stressors, right? It's dependent on the nature of the exercise performed and any other outside stressors. So depending on the exercise, right? Is it a speed session, right? Are you on the track or doing hills? Are you running trails versus road or flat ground? Is it strength training versus running versus some type of cross training? Your recovery needs to change and evolve based on the type of exercise. We don't always need to combat every single training session with some type of recovery. If it's a slow run, you might not need as much recovery as you do compared to a hard track workout, right? Or something that's like high intensity interval training or a heavy lifting day. Recovery is really going to change based on the nature of that exercise, but we really need to do a better job of taking into consideration outside stressors, work, the amount of mental stimulus we have to withstand on a daily basis, people that are working in hospital systems versus school teachers going through COVID versus firefighters, like whatever the job is, there's a lot of outside stresses that we need to take into consideration here and not just focus on, hey, I'm recovering from my trainings. Like, no, we're recovering from everything. How are our stress levels? How are we handling life? Husband, wife, a sick kid, someone needing surgery, loss of a loved one, like all that stuff really needs to be put in here because it's all stress on the body. And we need to recover from that as much as we can. Now, first area to touch on is sleep and relaxation. This is the foundation of the pyramid. I actually was looking through, I had a couple of pictures of my cat sleeps like this, crazy little guy under the covers. And sleep's great, right? He recovers with the best of them. But what we're seeing in the research is sleep deprivation has a negative effect on performance, mood, metabolism, and immune and cognitive function. So something we kind of all know, right? If you sleep poorly, you're going to function poorly. There were some research articles here that were showing that from an endurance perspective, running, triathlon, you're going to be more affected after only 2 nights of partial sleep deprivation. So not saying like you don't sleep at all, but if you get minimal amounts of sleep after 2 nights, your performance in your recovery is going to take a hit. So we need to really make sure that from an endurance perspective, right? Most people in here are runners, either training for some type of races like the aerobic type endurance training. Lack of sleep is going to really affect performance, some of these other things mentioned above, and limit your ability to recover. So we need to focus on getting good restful sleep from a quantity standpoint. So you can see here, research shows most people's sleep is less than optimal. Optimal right now through the research is looking like 7 to 9 hours per night. So I highly recommend even jotting down first thing in the morning, taking a little note, hey, fell asleep at 10, woke up at 6, all right, 8 hours. Next night, all right, fell asleep at 1, woke up at 6, 5 hours. Like just getting a good idea of how much you're actually sleeping per night from a quantity standpoint. And then how restful is that, right? Are you getting up in those, going to sleep, falling asleep at 1 a.m, waking up at 5, you're getting up 3 times to go to the bathroom, right? Okay, that's probably not restful, good quality sleep. So just kind of understanding and assessing where you currently fit into this. Obviously, we have Garmin's, we have other technology and things that will really tell us and give us a good representation of sleep. But just simply tracking that, I think, is helpful to make sure you're getting enough. And if you're not, what can you do about it? Some things that will negatively affect sleep: blue wavelength light, right? If we are on technology here, computers, cell phones, tablets, watching TV, movies, things like that, that emit the blue light, because this does reduce melatonin release, which helps us fall into a restful sleep. Muscle soreness, so training. One thing I think it was a misconception that I saw in some of the research was training is always going to help you sleep. You're more tired, you're more worn down, and therefore you'll sleep better. Depends on the degree of the training, right? The degree of the soreness. Sometimes this muscle soreness, this tissue soreness actually negatively affects our sleep. Things like caffeine, right? How many cups of coffee, tea, soda, pop are you drinking in the day? Are you drinking later in the day, in the afternoon, at dinner? That's not allowing you to fall asleep at a good hour. Travel, those of you that work and have to travel for work by car or by airplane, can really throw off your sleep cycle of sleeping in different locations, constant on the go behavior. And then injury as well. All of these things have been linked to poor sleep quality. So just kind of thinking about your situation. Again, looking back first, how much sleep you actually getting per night, and then looking at what goes into that. Is it watching Netflix before bed? Right. I was up for hours last night. I don't know if you guys have watched The Dropout on Netflix. I was watching that last night until I watched 2 episodes. I'm not going to lie, but I was rolling around in bed for a long, long time. And I know, like, for me, that just does not work before bed. I usually read a book. I usually like to meditate. I usually like to do things a little bit more low key, because that stimulation just doesn't sit well. And it caught up with me last night. Now, based on the studies, you can't just I see a lot of people, I slept great this weekend, I caught up, or I had a really good night of sleep, or the kids are out of town, they're traveling for sports, I slept in Sunday morning till 8 a.m. Like I'm on track now. Research shows if you are in like a partial sleep deprivation, you're not getting enough sleep per night, you need a minimum of 1 week of increased sleep to actually improve performance. So it's not just getting more sleep here and there. You have to stack that together for a long enough period of time to actually see those results. But also, like I said a little while ago in the couple previous slides, consider daily stress levels, anxiety, or elevated mental requirements, like of your job, of just the demands of your daily routine. These things need to be taken into consideration a little bit more. Too often we're focusing on training. How do I recover from training? Are we able to, again, in stressful situations, deep breathe, meditate, able to take a quick nap and reset, go for a walk in the woods, like do something that helps us reset and come out of this sympathetic state. That's something that will help sleep, but also facilitate more relaxation, take down cortisol levels, and just the overstimulation of the nervous system. Because if we're always in this stimulated state, it's very hard for us to relax and also recover from training and recover from the daily stresses of life. So focusing on not just overnight, how do you get more sleep, but on a daily basis, is there something you need to do to get out of that more stimulated state? And then understanding the majority of your positive adaptations happen at rest. This is, if I think about over the years, right, how many people, and I think endurance athletes specifically, do such a good job of training, consistent with the programs, pretty consistent, run, strength train, cross train, do these things to get better in their sport and work towards their goals, but then self-sabotage by not focusing on the recovery piece. You can only see so many results through training alone, but we need the body to catch up. We need to adapt. We need to get stronger. We need our muscles and our tissues to regenerate, to build, so we can run faster, we can get stronger, we can run longer, right? All of those things. So just realizing that majority of these adaptations are going to happen actually at rest. So when you're relaxing, when you're sleeping, are you getting actually a good 1 to 2 days off of full rest per week? And that doesn't mean going out and doing something else. Like, relax, right? Rest, recover, allow yourself to really benefit from the fruits of your labor if you're doing hard work and you're training on a regular basis. Like, you want that rest. You're not a slacker for doing it. So take that downtime, allow yourself actually to adapt to the training, get stronger, get faster, and you'll see better results from that. This image on the right side I liked. Objective, right? Goal is to get a minimum of 7 to 9 hours, right? 8's about the average there. Fall asleep within 30 minutes, and then wake feeling refreshed. So if you are someone that sleeps and sleeps and sleeps, right, you might get 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, but you wake up feeling pretty bad every morning. That's probably something to look into. Some of these are recommendations on how you can improve your sleep situation to just enhance that recovery process. Maintain a cool, dark, and quiet bedroom. Avoid electronic devices 30 minutes before bed. Create a non-stimulating before bed routine. Establish a consistent sleep-wake pattern. So going to bed at 10, waking up at 6, like consistently every single day. Getting into that pattern can be helpful. Avoid naps late in the afternoon and limit caffeine, right? So some things we know, but I think sometimes just we go through life and we forget some of these basics. So really touching on these and seeing how you can fine tune will really help you, because this is the foundation of it all right here. If there's one thing to improve, it's sleep and relaxation before we go on to anything else. We throw compression socks, we throw foam rolling and stretching and all these other things on top of training, usually because we're not doing this well enough. So if there's one thing I want you to take from today, focus on how can you sleep better, get more restful sleep. How can you relax and de-stress during the day if you're in these stimulated or high stress environments, because that will really pay off for you big time. Nutrition is the next one. And obviously I'm not a dietitian. I luckily have a really good dietitian that I work with and send everyone to when needed. But we need to understand here from a basic standpoint, nutrition, your needs depend on you and your body, right? You're specific, you're different than everyone else. The sport, right? Running might be different than soccer, which might be different than gymnastic, which might be different than bodybuilding, right? Goals, your specific goals of your training. Are you trying to PR a 5K? Are you running your first ultra marathon? The goals in your nutrition based on the goal in your training is going to vary significantly. The environment, right? Are you training in Michigan where yesterday it was snowing and 30 degrees, or are you in Florida where it's 80, 85 and humid? That plays a huge role into what you need from a recovery and nutrition standpoint. And then practical, right? What works for you? What do you have the time for? A lot of times we can't devote significant amount of time to nutrition or cooking these meals and doing things. Is it grabbing a healthy smoothie on the way back from a run, or bringing some type of bar with you, or mixed nuts and some type of assortment? Like, what simple things can you do that really fit your schedule and your lifestyle? Immediately post exercise is an important time for nutrition, right? Up to 2 hours post exercise, our body is actually more receptive to these nutrients, but it really matters the most if we have a training session within 8 hours. So for instance, today I went out at 3 o'clock, I had a break, did a 5-mile run. I don't have anything until tomorrow afternoon to strength training session. So do I need to really prioritize nutrition heavy at that point and have a drink when I finish, or some type of carb protein mix? Probably not, right? If you're doing a strength training session in the morning, you have a run later in the day, that's a speed workout of some way, right? You probably need something after that strength session, after that run. You're doing multiple things in a day. It's a lot more calories burned, demand on the system. That probably requires more from a recovery standpoint. So just understanding how your program is scheduled and what you need from a recovery standpoint. You can't go wrong consuming as close as possible post run, right? Just starting that process. But usually if we're following a good balanced nutrition plan, if we have some time in between from one workout to the next, we can kind of go into our normal nutrition plan. We can eat during our next meal. We can continue with our snacking. We don't need to prioritize as much as those people that are doing more high intensity training and those people that are training multiple times in the day. Our priority needs to be to minimize deficits, right? So we want to keep ourselves out of the hole, right? If you will. If you're always taking from the body, right? As we train, we're requiring energy. We're requiring returning calories into energy to train, to keep ourselves sustaining that effort for an extended period of time. if we're not replenishing that from a nutrition standpoint and we fall into this deficit and then we continue to train, we challenge the body, we're not giving enough nutrition, we fall into this deficit. It's a very tough place to get out of. And that's usually when we start to run into problems from a body standpoint. We're looking at injuries, these chronic overuse injuries, tendinopathies, bone stress injuries. These things tend to creep up if we're not giving the tissues what they need what they need to repair and regenerate. But then also from, again, everything else in the process, right? Brain function, hormone balance, organ, like all of these things require energy to function. So we want to make sure we're not going too far into that of restricting calories if we're training on a regular basis. That's why I highly recommend people that the goal is weight loss and they're doing some type of endurance training, really make sure you're working with a good dietitian as you do that, so you don't go too far into that deficit, because you need those calories to train and perform and get the body functioning the right way. And if we start withholding calories, that's when we can run into a serious problem. From a recovery standpoint, again, post-run, post-workout, we want to consume medium to high glycemic index carbohydrates and proteins to enhance muscle glycogen synthesis and muscle protein synthesis. So just as we are active, we're using the glycogen, the energy within the muscles to perform. Having some good carbohydrate source will replenish that directly into the muscles. And then also from a protein standpoint, that's how we replenish allow our muscles to repair and regenerate and get stronger, right? So we want to make sure carbs and proteins are essential immediately post-activity. And then obviously you can never overlook hydration and electrolytes. Back when I was my first job, young me, I was working as a head athletic trainer for a Division I soccer team. I would think back, this was Miami, Florida International University. 2-a-days, August. It was so hot outside, right? Hot and humid. But we would weigh the athletes in. They would do 2-a-days. We'd weigh them before practice. We weigh them after practice. They'd have their second session. We'd weigh them before practice. If they had lost a certain amount of body weight and they didn't replenish, they didn't get good nutrition, they didn't rehydrate, they didn't come back up to that standard requirement to train again, they were cut off for that next session. So making sure you're getting enough hydration, you're getting those electrolytes to keep everything balanced, because that goes into, again, nervous system function, it goes to muscle contraction, right? Those things are needed just for healthy function of our systems. Once we start getting into losing, again, significant amounts of hydration and water content, that can have very negative effects on the body if we don't intervene and do something. Now, understand that your nutrition constantly needs to change. And this is where we also get into trouble from a recovery standpoint. If you're suffering from an injury, do you need specific nutrition that's going to help address that injury? Is it a muscular injury or tendon issue? Is adding more protein into the mix, healthy fats, like is it nerve or sciatic, right? Sciatic nerve entrapment or a radiculopathy, like different types of nutrition has different nutrients in it that can help actually facilitate that injury. So thinking about what you consume to help. Are you someone that's just constantly tired? Do you feel like after every workout, you're always sore, your body's tired, you feel run down? I would definitely consider, with how much training you're doing, are you meeting the right needs in terms of nutrition, or are you training to this level, burning this many calories, but only consuming this much, and you're in this deficit? Because we need to make sure we're fueling appropriately and recovering appropriately for the amount of training. Then if you're increasing your training, which almost everyone is doing in some way at some point throughout the year, if we're training, doesn't matter the race, 5K, 10K, half marathon, full, ultra, we're starting in one place and we're building up mileage as we prepare for that race. So naturally, you're not going to eat the same things in the same quantity as you build up over time, right? And especially from a recovery standpoint, and your body responds to eating this pretty well after a 6-mile run, but now your long run is built up to 12 miles, 18 miles, or 24 miles, most likely your recovery is going to also have to step up, right? We need to make sure we're giving the body what it needs based on the demands of the training. And we can't give the body the same thing every time. So that nutrition standpoint, right? Nutrition and hydration probably has to grow and change as you build for that race. And then maybe it backs down or changes in some way once you finish the race, right? Nutrition constantly evolves based on the demands of your training. If strength training is added, you might need to add a greater protein component. And then if weight loss is a side effect, you really monitor that. I think working with a good dietitian is helpful. Want to make sure you're not getting too far into that deficit of you're burning so many calories, but only consuming so many, which is you're under consuming, because there are some negative side effects of that. But obviously following a well-rounded nutrition plan that works for you and takes into consideration your body, first and foremost, the volume and the type of training you're doing. And it consistently evolves over time just to make sure you have the nutrients to recover. All right, so next up here, let's look at water immersion. So water immersion was like that middle ground between most evidence and least evidence. It was right in the middle of the pyramid. So in this article, Halson said, although hydrotherapy is incorporated widely into post-exercise recovery regimes, information regarding these intervention is largely anecdotal. I found some research showing its benefits specific types of hydrotherapy or water immersion. People like it, people stand by it, but it's mostly opinion based, right? They feel better from doing it. So it's altering their perception of soreness, their perception of pain to allow them to feel better. But it might not actually be facilitating that actual physiological recovery process. The study showed it may be more beneficial actually for endurance trained athletes, which I thought was interesting. Cold water immersion and contrast therapy, which is right, cold water is cold water, right? 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Contrast therapy is doing cold water for a minute, warm water for a minute. There's different times, but based on the research here, it looked like doing 1 minute of cold, 1 minute of warm, 1 minute of cold, 1 minute warm, doing 7 cycles of that, or 14 to 15 minutes was the most effective, as was about 14 to 15 minutes of cold water immersion. So cold water in contrast seemed to be the most effective from a recovery standpoint. And like I mentioned a second ago, this wasn't just psychological. We felt better from doing this, but we're not sure what it impacted inside the body. They actually looked at these markers within the bloodstream. So if you test the blood and you see, okay, what substances are in here, you see after a hard workout, different inflammatory markers. Based on doing the cold water and the contrast therapy, there was actually a reduction in some of those markers of muscle damage, showing it does potentially kind of facilitate that recovery process, but also helps reduce a loss in muscle strength, reduces muscle soreness. So a big thing to realize is we're kind of in the middle here of what we see. There's some evidence supporting, but it's also largely anecdotal of people believe it helps them, and that's why people continue to do it. So being very aware of temperatures here as well. You need to be in the right ranges, right? So cold water needs to be between 50 to 59 degrees. The warm water, if we're doing contrast, between 100 and 104 degrees. So if you start losing that temperature, right, the cold water is warming too much, the warm water is not nearly cold, you're probably going to lose effectiveness in some way. But cold water immersion, getting in a cold tub for 15 minutes, or that contrast, 1 minute on cold, 1 minute in the warm, and then alternating for about 7 cycles or 14 minutes. That is what has been proven to be the most effective. Now, more inconclusive methods, and I want to get you guys going here. It took a little bit longer through those first two. Compression garments, right? Compression socks, compression sleeves, all of that stuff. Largely through the research, the perception of soreness is reduced about 24 hours post-run, but there was no sign of any improvement in performance. So if you had someone run in the morning a 10K and then wear compression garments as they train, run a 10K in the afternoon, we didn't see anything from a performance standpoint that those compression garments were actually going to improve or facilitate recovery and improve performance on the subsequent run or training session. But people felt better from wearing them. They felt less sore, they felt less pain. So it's that psychological component of oh, this is helping. Massage, which is very interesting. The quote says, while massage is beneficial in improving psychological aspects of recovery, most evidence does not support massage as a modality to improve recovery of functional performance. Don't shoot the messenger here. That's going to make a lot of people mad. They also said in the study, which I thought was good, to the defensive massage, massage is helpful for many other reasons, right? Not just psychological. It may not enhance that recovery process, but they said injury prevention, which I don't love, but an injury reduction or soft tissue standpoint, there are so many benefits to the endurance athlete that the massage is still a very valuable supplement to your training program, although it may not necessarily speed up that recovery process from one session to the next, right? From one day to the next. Active recovery. So this is if you had a run or a training session in the morning, later in the day or the next morning, you went out for a walk to elevate the heart rate, a bike ride, or got in the pool to swim. So some type of active recovery. Research is very incomplete here. I actually saw a study that showed getting in the pool and doing moderate effort swimming helped remove lactate more from the system than slower aerobic activity. So I thought that was interesting, but overall, there's really nothing conclusive showing that active recovery is a good form of recovery between training sessions. Stretching, similar, there's no benefit from stretching as a recovery method, but also, right, most of these, none of these are detrimental to do, right? So if you like them and they work for you and they feel good, I would definitely recommend do them if you have the time, as long as you're prioritizing sleep, relaxation, and nutrition. I think a lot of people go to these things as the ways to recover and they're sleeping like crap or they're not eating well, right? It doesn't make sense, right? These are not actually, again, conclusively backed by the research. Go to the things that work and then supplement with these other areas if you need to. And also realizing about stretching, running is a very mid-range sport. We don't need a whole lot of range of motion to run. That's why running has already been proven not to be effective from an injury reduction standpoint. Stretching does not reduce your likelihood of injury, and it also does not help you recover faster. It might feel good temporarily to stretch a muscle that feels tight, but most likely it's just feeling good, but not actually expediting that recovery process. So as we wrap up here, and sorry, I went a little fast at the end. I don't want to take too much of your time. Considerations need to be placed on if a recovery procedure is necessary. Do you actually need that, right? What does the training look like? What are the demands of the training? When is your next training session? Do you need some type of recovery between those to set yourself up for success, right? You can't go wrong doing something, but is it always needed depending on the intensity, depending on the timing of your workouts? What can practically be performed in the time frame, right? If you only have an hour between sessions for whatever reason, getting in doing the contrast therapy from cold to hot to cold to hot to changing to doing all these things, right? Is that practical for you? Is it a nutritional strategy that you can grab on the way? Is it a mix, a hydration mix, water, electrolytes, or what have you? And then what strategies have evidence for their use, right? Sleep, relaxation, and hydration, those need to be the priority. So make sure you're focusing on those. That should start tonight, right? You should be thinking about what am I going to do to improve that sleep quality tonight and sleep duration tonight. And then obviously experiment with different methods and determine what is best for you. I'm not saying don't do these things. I still like to walk, right? If I have a hard run in the morning, there's no get out and walk. I feel better from doing that. I might do actually some stretch. Oh, my hip feels tight. I'm going to do some stretching. It feels better as I do that, but I'm still understanding as I do it, it's not actually speeding up this recovery process. It's probably just making me feel better temporarily, which is still a good psychological thing to happen. So just kind of understanding and being honest with what you're doing in the response that you're receiving. So if you guys have any questions at all, welcome to schedule a free consultation, 20, 30 minutes, jump on a Zoom call, talk about your situation, us figure out how we can fine tune. One thing that I think it's sometimes on your own, it's hard to get out of your own way at times. So it's good to have a third party there looking and being objective. I'm going to send a consultation link in there, not a sales pitch in disguise. Don't want to sell you on anything. Just trying to help you if you need help and want to talk through some of these recovery strategies, see if you can narrow down. It might be referring you to a dietitian. It might be offering some suggestions in certain areas or looking at your training program. How much are you training? What are you recovering? What have you recently added in? When's your race? Sometimes moving different variables around can be really helpful. So if you need that help, you're welcome to schedule a call. We'd love to help you. Any questions here? I know I'm a couple minutes over. I wanted to only take 20 to 30 minutes, but I'm going to hang out for 2 minutes, answer some questions. Also, you'll receive the replay tomorrow if you want to refresh back on this. If you want to send the replay to a friend, fellow runner, anyone, you're welcome to share anywhere you want. I don't really care. But questions, comments, concerns, feedback, anything for me before we wrap up? Silence. All right, guys. So that's it. Thank you for joining. I hope you guys have a great Tuesday evening, rest of your week. Enjoy the warm weekend coming up, 75, 80 degrees. I just want to say thanks for joining in tonight, and think about that recovery. It starts right now. Recover from this webinar and get to bed. Thanks, everyone.